George, why are you wearing socks?
So we woke up this morning after having a little bit of a rough night and found that the ice had fully cleared finally.
Yeah, so basically we'd been iced in on the Ashby for about a week, just over a week.
A little over a week,
Yeah.
I think. But this morning it was all nice and clear.
And we actually chose a really good place to get iced in, and it was somewhat planned.
Yeah.
But Market Bosworth is really nice. We were right next to Bosworth. Was it called Bosworth Marina?
Bosworth Marina.
They let us use their LSAN. They've got a laundry.
Yeah, which is really quite a nice setup.
Yeah. Yeah, so today we finally moved. It was just a short little cruise, and we've come right to almost as far as you can go on the Ashby now.
It was quite a nice cruise. The
George and I rode for the first half, and then we walked for the last third. We didn't walk that far.
It's very picturesque.
And then there was one little tunnel to go through, which wasn't long at all, but
It's actually a bit daunting.
because it had a kink in it.
Yeah, it's the first tunnel we've been in that has sort of a bend, and the bend is about halfway along. And so, I'm coming around the corner, and from your perspective, you could see through it. So you yell over. I'm slowing down, like I need to read these instructions and stuff, because all I see is this incredibly black hole. Because I really couldn't see anything more than the first maybe 3 feet of the tunnel. So then when you said, you can see all the way through, I'm like, oh, good, okay, that puts up my confidence. Rev the engine a little bit further, start pulling ahead, because you told me there was nobody coming or anything. And then I get to actually line up to go into the tunnel, and instead of this nice sort of, semicircular thing at the other end, I've got kind of a, like as if it has been cut off partway, right? So it's like, that doesn't really look wide enough for the boat. What am I doing? So you get to this curve, and then you kind of curve around it, and now you can see the end of the tunnel. But sure enough, the roof starts kind of undulating down towards you, and like it gets shorter as you get towards the end, but it also kind of gets shorter on one side than the other. So my left-hand side kept getting too close, and I kept having to duck lower and lower and lower. So I actually spent the entire time sort of bent 90 degrees.
And George and I went over the top, and then there's no obvious route for you to go, because you end up in the little village, and there's no signpost telling you where the canal is. So we zigzagged along until we managed to find this little signpost that said where the canal was.
Yeah. And I was going so slow in there that I thought I'd come out and see you like, hey, time's up, where have you been? Like I was going to call the police or something.
I wanted to film you coming out, but I got there too late, even though me and George were running along the top. And then we got here, and we met our friends. That was a really nice welcome.
Yeah.
And
just came around the corner, and there were some people we knew. And that was really lovely. And then I took George for a walk up to the actual end of the Ashby to throw a ball for him.
End of the navigable.
End of the navigable portion of the Ashby, yeah. There's a winding hole just before the swing bridge, and then there's this little swing bridge and a sign saying that if you go past this point, your boat can't be longer than 52 feet. Before the swing bridge, it's Canal and River Trust. From the swing bridge forward, it's this charity that's been working for 30 years or something to eventually reopen and re-water the entire stretch. And they've got this section that's not even, I think, 3/4 of a kilometer long, like maybe half a mile, something like that. You can't see through the bridge, and then you come to the point where you actually can see through the bridge, and it's like, oh, that's really quite sad, because there's bridge, and then there's a small winding point that would work for a small boat, and then you can see the canal continuing along, except for it's full to sort of waist height with dirt. Really what looks like an excavation that continues on.
Beyond the bit that's kind of derelict, there is a bit that's been restored.
Yeah, and
So-
already rewatered, and so we're going to hopefully walk up there to see that.
We'll bus up there. Today we're off on a mini adventure and we're walking to the end of the Ashby. Not the end of the Ashby where we're moored, but the end of the actual Ashby.
Yeah, where it historically ended in Moira.
Conkers.
Conkers. We're walking up there.
So there's kind of three sections of the walk. There's from here to Measham, which is kind of across farmers' fields. Then there's Measham to Donisthorpe, which is, I think it's down like a disused railway line, but it's quite a nice part. And then you finally get to where the canal starts up again, because there's not canal between here and Donisthorpe.
No, there's just dirt and a future.
and old coal fields, but which are quite interesting. And then when you get to Donisthorpe, you've got the mile or 2 miles of canal up to Conkers via Moira.
Where the furnace is.
Let's go.
Yeah. So next is the end of the Ashby. At least the Canal and River Trust portion. And then that's the Ashby Canal Association portion. Which eventually will continue all the way.
Michael's fascinated by what a ponderous carriage is. Very curious. So this is currently the end of the navigable Ashby, if you're a 52-foot boat, because here's the winding hole for 52-foot boats only. And then beyond you can see work to continue the canal. It started to rain. I told Michael not to bring his coat because he wouldn't need it. I think I'm in trouble.
This is one of the Ashby Canal mine markers. So this is a marker that indicates where there was a seam of coal that was worked at some point in the past, and it says on the left-hand side which seams are worked, and on the other side how many meters below ground, and they've got it color coordinated. This one has only one seam, you know, romantically titled the main coal seam. Quite a few of the other ones have 4 or 5 on there. And then on the other side it says that 181 meters below ground, which I'm hoping is here, 181 meters straight down should be the actual place where the coal seam tunnel went. Right, so this is Donisthorpe, and that is the beginning of the end of the Ashby Canal. Yeah, so this is the part that's been rewatered and reopened, and which we probably won't see very many boats on.
So weird there being mooring rings and no roads.
Right, so we've made it to Moira, and this is the Moira furnace, where there is a museum that is not open until Easter. This was the blast furnace that was opened in the 1900s, because this whole area was being used for coal and coke and limestone mining, and lots of natural riches involving primarily dead dinosaurs and shellfish. And they would have taken coke and iron ore and coal and well, mainly coke, iron ore and limestone, put it in at the top, and then basically cooked it at extremely high temperatures until the iron ore melted. The coke and limestone would have removed impurities and stuff, so it would have turned from pig iron and just ore into iron slag, which would actually have been useful And so way down here at the bottom, it would have all collected together, and they would have pulled out a bung, big hunk of clay, basically. And when they pulled that out, you'd have flowing molten iron, and you'd use that to put it into some casts, into molds, and then there would have been a building here where the iron would cool and eventually become iron ingots. So then you'd use that to do things like build bridges. And I'm going to go look at it close up. Oh, that's kind of neat. Yeah, stick your head here.
Cold.
Yeah. Wouldn't have been back in the day. Would have been really hot. It's a really interesting place. More Industrial Revolution. Apparently, this building was used as a furnace for about 2 years because it wasn't actually very effective. The Earl of Moira had built it to try and make lots and lots and lots of money, and what he ended up doing is becoming a landlord for the people who lived in this. It was 4 cottages, 2 on this side, 2 on that side, back to back. When the canal was closed over in the 1940s, this whole building was still lived in, and that's why it survived. And the old engine room was turned into some more housing, and even those arches were, I guess, walled in and used as housing, so kind of cool. And we have our 2 boats with the fascinating new mooring system I've never seen, where you just hang out in the middle of the canal. I like it. One of them is a trip boat that works in the summer. Probably not the gray one. So this is the second swing bridge on the Ashby Canal. I don't think this one gets used very much. Like, probably just, you know, just for those 2 boats every occasionally. I really like what they've done with this. Long walk. So this is Moira Lock, which for some reason is a double lock, but not a very big one. So I guess you must have had to have opened the whole thing when you were doing like large boats. Like the actual mechanism is physically different on the lock gates. Like it's side paddles on the front, two door paddles on the middle, and rear ones. It's really sad to see it all kind of,
Not being used.
yeah,
Restored but not being used.
restored, but ultimately only used for this, like, you know, like more or less just to be a piece of the scenery instead of to actually be like a living object. I guess that's one thing that I find like really compelling about, you got this old piece of industrial history, but the fact that it's still in regular use is sort of what's interesting to me, because when you get something like this, it's got a feeling of kind of like a tomb, you know, it's like,
Yeah, like a museum.
yeah, without being, you know, without being like a live thing. And yet this is one that's trying to be brought back to life. So it's kind of like, you know, it's like you can see this thing that's getting CPR, but so far it's kind of like, you know, we're still pushing on it, but it isn't actually beating on its own. Oh, shall we continue?
Yeah, to the end.
To the end.
So we've made it to the end of
The Ashby de la Zouch.
the restored bit that you can't navigate.
Yeah.
And we did find 2 boats on it.
Yeah. 2 boats to fit into this bathyard basin where you could easily moor 70 or so boats just around the circumference.
And maybe not 70.
Quite a few.
Quite a few. And I found it funny all the way up. There's like mooring rings and stuff for these.
Yeah, it's kind of
these
sad.
2 boats.
Yeah.
So we were just saying that it's actually really lovely up here, and it's a shame that you can't currently navigate up here. And also what a contrast it must be now, where the forest has been planted, to what it must have been like 150 years ago, when this was all coal field.
Okay, I'm not sure what was going on here exactly. Like this must be where this is part of where the coal fields were. So maybe this is where they were bringing boats to load them, or maybe not, because not all of this was necessarily the original canal path, right? But still, there was that lock. There were boats. They would have been moving in this direction, loaded with coal, and you'd have been heading up the Ashby, but you would have been passing through working coal fields and limestone fields, past those 7 limestone furnaces, which would have been just spewing an acid stench into the sky and smoke. It would have been mainly carbon dioxide, which doesn't really have a smell or anything, but it would have been like large amounts of colored gases, and then you've got the big iron furnace. You can imagine that like
just dirty, smelly, polluted.
This area would have been, not all of it, but like the water side itself, and sort of this whole thing would have been this industrial remnant of like covered in coal, covered in muck. People with very short lifespans because working in a lime field and burning lime and turning it into quicklime is not remotely safe. We have this experience of these canals as this kind of like remnant of this industrial heritage.
But it's just a leisure activity for boaters and cyclists and walkers, and like there's so much wildlife, and I mean there's the city areas as well, but
something which was built to service the needs of massive
dirty,
onrushing industrialization, this form of industrialization that, because they hadn't quite figured out like hardened steels and everything, had to be built out of like very large pieces of iron and brass and copper, and and all of it covered in a thick layer of grease, and this just huge amounts of burning material to try and make more to feed the industry of this empire that was expanding throughout the world, on the basis really of the usefulness of these canals and getting materials from point A to point B. It's just kind of an interesting thing that like what was extremely, if not just fundamentally utilitarian and everyday, from the perspective of the times, it would have been this exciting moment in which this industry was building and everything, but you wouldn't have seen this as a beautiful part of your heritage. You'd see this as...
You certainly wouldn't walk 6 miles to get to the end.
No, you wouldn't be walking along to come up to the
Conkers
Conkers Waterside Centre at the heart of the National Forest, because it wouldn't have been here, and the ducks wouldn't have been here.
And all these people living on the canals and holidaying, and
more of them coming in all the time, and mainly it's because of this sort of romantic idea that has no basis in the fact of the time.
Okay, so now we just need to walk all the way back.
Yeah.
Or get the bus.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll walk over the...
Back.
Ready?
So,
We're
not doing that one yet. Today we moved from...
Oh, we're not doing that one yet?
We're just going to do...
You totally threw me under the bus again.
What?
I thought that's what we were talking about.
We're doing 2 minutes on what we've done today.
Right.
What have you done today?
Drove a boat.
We finally, whatever. Can you sit back? Because you're like, that's better. Pretend you like me.
I do pretend I like you all the time, actually. Buddha likes you too. And
Who?
a little dog knows.
Who likes you too?
Buddha.
Yeah, Buddha.
Well,
Homer.
Homer Buddha.
So we need to say we got iced in at Market Bosworth for a week and we moved today. And that's all we need to say. Go.
We got iced in at Market Bosworth for a week and we moved today. Go.
So annoying.
Recording sound, recording video. What are we talking about? George.
Oh.
That didn't fall.
We just started filming.
Who?
Oh, you ruined my shot. George! Can you come and be in my video? Thanks, love. That was pretty perfect.
I was sitting on the toilet and there was a loud bang and then there was a large number of fragments sitting behind me on the cistern and all over the floor. They were in the middle of repainting the thing, and so I guess they've just replaced it, and it wasn't really well positioned. So when I sat on the plastic, I must have overstressed it, and it just went kabang. So now I have like a painful pinched piece, and I'm making up for it with marshmallows and hot chocolate. And now apparently one of them was turned into a World War I kitchen. I'm not sure how you cook World War I, but I suppose, haggis or something. World War I style chefery.